Okay, so now we're going to look at this next problem. This next problem is also a geometric series, a sum, and we're going to leave this part blank. The sum of how many terms equals a1 minus, a1 times 1 minus r to the nth power over 1 minus r. So the reason I'm leaving this part blank is because it's a little tricky to think about the sum of the terms if it's not 1 through a number. Remember, we saw this in a previous video. It brings up a tricky thing about counting. So we are going from the 7th term to the 19th term. So remember what we said before, if you are going to just subtract them, right? Think about like the 1st through the 10th. If you did 10 minus 1 equals 9, it's not correct because there should be 10 terms, not just 9. So you have to do the add 1 to get the total. So if you do 19 minus 7 equals 12. It's a little tricky. You actually have to do 12 plus 1 equals 13 terms. And that's why I wanted to do this one separately, because this one's a little bit trickier. So let me just move this stuff over to the side. Oops, it did not work. So I'm going to move it over just so we have some more space to work on the actual problem itself. Okay, so let's get some space here. So that's why there are 13 terms. And then your first term is actually, instead of the first term, I would write like 7. And that's because we're starting with the 7th term and going through the 19th term. So when I start plugging stuff in, the sum of the 13 terms, I need my 7th term first. So I need a sub 7. I'm going to just plug it in. So 10, 2 to the 7 minus 1. It's going to be 10 times 2 to the 6th power. Okay, so I'm going to do that real quick on my calculator. 2 to the 6th and times 10. That's going to give me 640. Okay, so it's going to be 640 times 1 minus. Now, my ratio is 2, right? That's coming from your general formula. Remember, your general geometric formula looks like this, right? And it's matching what we have here. So ratio and then number of terms is 13, all over 1 minus ratio of 2. Okay, and then we want to plug it into our calculator. Now, remember how I said before, you have to be careful about order of operations. So I normally start inside parentheses and do 2 to the 13th power. And then I do 1 minus second answer to pull back the last thing that I just typed. And then I have to do that times the coefficient of 640. And I kind of just go step by step because there's less errors that are likely to happen. If you try and type it all in at once, sometimes you're more likely to make a mistake. And then divide by, oops. I want to, that is not working. I'm going to do second answer, divide by, and then 1 minus 2 is negative 1, which is the same thing. So 524, 524, oh, excuse me, it was negative, so it becomes positive. 524, 2240, positive, 2240. Okay, so there is your sum. And remember, the trickiest thing here is figuring out that there are 13 terms, and that's your work here on the side. I've got one more problem similar to this on the next page. Really similar process. So what I want you to do is I want you to try and do this one on your own as practice. Your first step is going to be to figure out how many terms there are. So for number 6, feel free to write it down. And then go back and look at the last problem if you need to reference that process. So I'm going to pause and do the work, and I'll unpause when I'm done. Okay, here is my full work. There are 10 terms, and my work is over here because when you do 13 take away 4, you get 9, but you have to add 1, right? It's the tricky thing about counting sometimes. Looking back at my reading assignments from high school, I'm sure I always misquoted how many pages I had to read. Sad times, guys. And then I had to find the 4th term because that is the first one that I'm starting to add. So when I find that, that's going to be, I'm going to just highlight it for you. That's going to be in place of like my A1 because I'm starting with the 4th term. And then you just want to make sure you keep the full decimal. You want to always use second answer. And that's it.